The blue projects. So basically, the ones that involve asphalt.
So in other words, we're not tearing any streets out, we're just gonna cover them up. Right?
Correct, correct. There's one area that Tim, the city has used crack and seat before, where you go in and if the street's all busted up but the curb's in good shape, you can go through, saw cut the gutter line, bust up the street a little more, pack it down, overlay it, and he's got at least one candidate for that. So that'd be the most.
We had an engineer firm when I was still on the SAS committee come in and discuss. And he was right too. There's a lot of these streets that maybe a block out of the street is really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you take 4 blocks, there's absolutely nothing wrong.
Yep.
So why slate doing the whole thing? We got so many dollars to work with. Let's do the bad spots.
Exactly. And if you look up here, you can see that we're, where's a good example? Well, this whole street's bad.
Yeah.
To that point there.
That must be
That's Upper Terrace.
Terrace Drive.
9th, all right? But not, let's see, yeah, it goes down to that point. But like here, we've got a good overlay, and then the intersection could use some patching, but then we've got a couple of streets that are in good shape. This one's existing asphalt here. It's, the winter looks like it was kind of hard on it. Good opportunity to get in there, mill that, overlay that. Let's see, these 2 blocks here. So it's pretty selective. And if you were to take this out and drive around and take a look at them, I think you'd understand why the ones are chosen are on here. Now there's some other that are long-term big projects like these 3 right here. They're sealed coat, no storm sewer, but they're low volume residential. So that's one of those things that the council would have to weigh when in the 20-year plan do you want to do a full reconstruction and take care of the drainage issues here. Up in here, this street is terrible. It looks like during certain eras, there might have been some bad material, because there's some streets that, it's just, the concrete just crumbles. And that's one of those streets, and then Terrace View is one of the other ones. You get down here and it's just, spalling, crumbling. But this is pretty selective. Your streets are actually in pretty good shape.
pretty good shape.
Yeah.
We haven't fixed the street around here for 20 years.
There's some drainage
That's why we
issues,
have the problem we do now.
Right. I
but
wouldn't call them good shape.
things are relative.
All the streets down Riverwalk Park
Go
are
to
great.
University Drive and
Yeah, they're in the
Cedar
house
Falls.
left. That house left.
When we broke the streets down, when we were talking about trying to get started on this thing, we looked at the less difficult process, which is the asphalting. It doesn't require a lot of forming. It doesn't require. There's several of the streets will take some milling. Some of them will just only take overlay, and they are sectioned. They're like maybe a 2-block stretch or something, not the entire route, at least in terms of as far as asphalt is concerned. We have $253,000 worth of the estimates are in urban renewal TIF, which gives us a luxury or the opportunity to use that. Well, it's not really $995,000 anymore, but that GO bond that we had identified in 2007, 2009, okay, when Monsanto was coming our way. That was for roads to be done, taken care of out on the southwest part over by their eventual plant. The plant obviously has been put on hold for a very long time. They released our obligation to the bond, but we are tied to the criteria of using it only in urban renewal and TIF areas. The entire asphalt project is at $721,000 estimated. We have $575,000 budgeted for fiscal year 15 for this kind of project. If we have we take out the $253,000, we're down to like 400 and some odd thousand, so we'll come in under the money that we have budgeted at this particular point. And again, these are projects that can be done. The timeline we're looking at is starting after Ragbri, after the 25th. We don't want to have any streets out there torn up at this point. And we're done by 1st of November, assuming weather was,
Yeah, the asphalt plant typically closes around Thanksgiving,
yeah,
so.
or sooner if it gets colder faster. So,
But this is, they'll be able to get in and knock this out pretty fast. There's a lot of locations, but the nice thing about asphalt is it's quick.
One problem I think we've had in the past with asphalt is it brings the level of the road up, and everybody thinks it shrinks the curb down. Obviously, it doesn't do that, but then a few years later, they come along and say, oh, you've got a curb problem here, we're gonna have to do something with that, so.
When you design a new street, you look at the water level in the gutter line, and depending on the classification of the street, whether it's arterial, local, you can only allow, design-wise, it's only supposed to allow a certain amount of water in the gutter, and it's designed for a 3-inch overlay, and still carry, if properly designed, carry your 5-year storm, no problem. Now, 100-year storm, yeah, everything gets wet. I mean, that's
unfortunately, we've had some roads that have been overlaid more than one time.
right.
If you go to 3rd Street and 13th Avenue, the curb is no longer visible on the north,
It's pretty near the case right out here at First Street.
well, not now, because we have a brand new curb.
Pretty near the case.
Was at a certain one time, and that's how we had a problem in front of Dunlap's with drainage,
exactly.
because the asphalt was overlaid into the curb, which is okay, but it wasn't whatever the words may be, angled properly to allow drainage.
And nowadays with the mill and overlay, they get in there and they grind it all up, and it's actually, the asphalt millings are worth money, so it's worthwhile for them to go in and grind it and take it, and
Some of them were even using it right again right then and there.
yeah, somebody was telling me that, where was that? Maybe it was on 20, and I haven't physically seen this done yet, but it was milled and then processed and then heated up and laid right back out right behind it.
Yeah,
There's
that's
one
what was done on
now.
20,
Yeah,
this new section they just finished.
yeah. I mean, I've seen concrete where they've kind of done that process.
It's a
but-
different color, I think. It comes out a whole different black.
Yep. And then they use it for a base course, and then they'll go in and put fresh asphalt surface on it.
Do they put any kind of, you see sometimes where they're advertising they're doing a rubber underlay of asphalt. I mean, it seems like water's terrible on concrete, but if you keep getting water coming back under asphalt, it's worse, because there ain't no cuts to
Yeah.
alleviate the pressure.
I had an overlay project here, when was that? Last summer. Brand new overlay. L.O. Pelling went in, put it in, laid it down, broke a water main underneath it. And the end of the asphalt was just flapping. There was so much water that got underneath it. So yeah, water underneath asphalt, not good.
Which brings the point that we're gonna go through, an infrastructure checks and
Correct.
verifications before we do any of these kinds of things, where there's gonna be a storm sewer intake, or whether or not we have to replace a main or something along those lines, plus telephone, gas, and whatever else will be checked out before we tear up and replace, much like we did with the First Street curb and sidewalk project. We got it open, guys, let's make sure we got everything in there that works right.
And as I was putting this together, I talked with your city staff on known problem areas, and there was a drainage area over in here that I think Tim's going to take care of himself. And I know he mentioned the water valve over here, but there weren't a lot of bad sewer and bad water mains identified. So, but that was before the winter when it was a tough winter for everybody.
Yeah.
There was.
But yeah, as John mentioned, as part of the project, we definitely want to, before we go in and redo a new street, televise the sewer underneath, make sure everything under the street is in good shape. We don't wanna put a new street in, then next year go in and have to replace the sewer.
And also, Tim has been going through the storm sewer project portions of it to identify those things that we can do in-house, as opposed to having them contracted out to get done, which will save us money, obviously, in the long run.
And during the next phase, as we start to do the design for this, I'll be working closely with Tim, and we'll go out and look at every street and make sure to get his input, because he knows these streets quite well.
One thing on these streets, and I noticed to my amazement, is that streets up in my neighborhood are listed as fair to poor, and it's probably a 10-year-old neighborhood. But one of the problems is water running underneath the roads, because you have high side. I mean, is there something that can be done to,
Which neighborhood?
up on
Northeast.
15th Avenue Northeast?
So you're up in here, all that new.
Yeah,
I know a couple of those.
you got a lot of swales
Yeah.
where the water's run underneath and taken the,
There, there may not have been the best compaction when they built the street. I know you can see 2 red dots there, which I believe they have been fixed since I made this. But yeah, just huge settlement problem. There's 2 manholes there, and it was obvious that they weren't compacted around, and the street just collapsed right around them. And that's where, when you put in a new street, it's critical to have good standards. You know, if you're gonna require them to put in sub-drains, you know, with the rock base, and then inspect.
Whose responsibility is that? Is that in the engineer, the designer, or is that the person who's actually putting a street in?
With developments, typically the developer is building it and the city inspects it. And then, once it's completed, then the developer will turn it over to the city.
And then when they have problems with it, when it's only 10 years old, where does it go from there? Whose responsibility is it? But I mean, then as
Yeah.
we're wanting to repair it like now, is it the engineer that shows us how to repair it and do it correctly? Or is it the person who's gonna do the work for us that
That's weird.
we make sure does it correctly or have the rules in? Is there a way that goes? I'm just trying to learn, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm asking stupid questions.
Oh, no, there's a number of questions there. When the development's first done and the road is first put in, that's the critical time
lose
for
everything.
city staff to
What do
inspect
I,
to
for
make
some
sure,
reason, I don't know why.
whether it's a sewer service, water service, you know, and make sure that they're getting the compaction they need on the road. The city can bring in like a Terracon, they do material testing, and they can be on site and just give you that independent review of what's being done, make sure that the compaction's there. Because once the street's accepted, pretty much the cities own it. I don't know if your city attorney has some experience on that one, but
Oh yeah, lots of bad experiences.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we usually require a bond, but the bond's only good for a couple of years usually.
Right.
And the theory is that you'll know if it's done, you know, you usually see compaction problems right away.
Yep.
But, then usually you wind up with a street, and then about 10 years later, it starts crumbling. It's just the way it goes. They only last, they tell us 20 years is the average lifetime of a.
Yeah,
So
I've seen some
whatever.
last longer, others less. You know, and a lot of it, you know, if you've got good soil underneath it, you can get a lot of years out of it. Yeah, bad soil, yeah, not so much. But then you have to look at the cost of, okay, how much does it cost to tear out bad soil, bring in new? And at some point you go, well, in 20 years, you know, look at the life cycle of it, you're better off to go the 20.